And joining us now on TMA, on YouTube, on our podcast, and wherever else you hear us, it is my pleasure to welcome a producer, a wrestler, a booker, a podcast host, a best-selling author, just a fabulous entertainer and guy. And he'll be in town this weekend with Jeff Jarrett. We are talking about the great Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you?
I'm good. You left out WWE Hall of Famer, but with that list of accolades, it's easy to miss one or two.
I had that down in my notes to talk to you about that, so that's why I left it out of there. Yes, WWE Hall of Famer went in last year's class with 2020 as well, as they didn't have one in 2020. You guys, I'm looking forward to this, and so is all of St. Louis. You and Jeff Jarrett are going to be in town at the South Broadway Athletic Club from 2 to 5 p.m. this Saturday prior to the Royal Rumble. And we not let people know, 2 to 5, Royal Rumble starts at 6:30, so you'll have plenty of time to come to your event and still get over to the Dome for the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, the venue for our event is only 2.4 miles away, so if the weather's nice, hell, you could walk there and save money on parking.
That's true. And with the turnout, it may be hard finding parking, so I would suggest doing that, or just Uber over, and then you can drink whatever you want and don't have to worry about driving, and you can enjoy Jeff and you, and also Royal Rumble. And tickets can get, you can buy tickets, ericandjefflive.com, purchase tickets. I think you guys are going to have a VIP meet and greet from 2 to 3, and then you're going to do the live show from 3 to 5. Correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you dropped out of there for a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna open up at 2 to 3 for VIPs, and you'll be able to get swag, and if you got something you want to get signed, books, pictures, whatever, memorabilia, that's what that'll be for. And then the show actually starts for non-VIP members at 3 p.m.
And it's going to be fun. And as you know, we had Ric Flair on last week talking about St. Louis as a wrestling city. And I don't think it gets enough credit. I mean, you go all the way back to wrestling at the Chase. I saw my very first match as a little kid. My grandparents took me to wrestling at the Chase, and I saw Cowboy Bob Ellis start bleeding, and I started crying. I wasn't used to that. But St. Louis is a huge wrestling town.
It is a huge wrestling town, and not to pat myself on the back any more than I do throughout the normal course of business, but WCW holds the record, I believe, for wrestling attendance for a Nitro, a televised event. So we'll see if WWE is able to break that record this weekend. But St. Louis is a massive wrestling town. It always has been. Great history in St. Louis, and some of the most memorable events in the history of our business, I should say our business, the business, since I'm not in it really anymore. But that took place in St. Louis, so there's a lot of history there.
It is, and my next thing I put down is congrats on the WWE Hall of Fame, which you took care of already. But was that something I saw when you were told on the podcast that you were going in? You were very emotional, but is that something you thought about? Like, I know I'll go in eventually, and when will it be? Is it something you thought about?
Yes and no, because typically, starting in about January is when WrestleMania chatter starts to really heat up, and social media and things like that. And then they gradually start announcing inductees into the WWE Hall of Fame. And naturally, as an active part of social media, my social media feeds would fill up with, hey, are you going in this year? Is it going to be this year? Are you disappointed if you don't get inducted? So it would be a lie for me to suggest I didn't think about it. But I didn't think about it in the sense of it being urgent, or I kind of put it out of my mind. I didn't think about it as much as people probably suspected I did. I always kind of took the position of, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I'm still proud of what I did and grateful for what I was able to experience. And that was pretty much the end of it for me. But, when Corey Graves, made it official, even though I had a sense that it was likely to happen, in that interview with Corey, and I think one of the reasons I got so emotional is because the reality of it finally set in. It became a real thing and not just something in social media chatter and speculation.
Yeah, well, congratulations. A hell of a class, too. And then you got in with the 2020 class, too. So you had Kane going in. You had Dick the Bruiser, which I can't believe he wasn't in already, but pretty good class, the 2 classes you went in with.
Yeah, it was, and that was one of the things that, again, the whole experience was kind of surreal to me. But because I didn't really think about it a lot previously, once I finally got inducted, and really when I went out onto the stage, it occurred to me all of the great names that are in the WWE Hall of Fame, and so many of them were people that I grew up watching as a fan, long before I ever got into the industry. And certainly before I ever dreamt of or considered the idea of even being involved in the industry, I was a fan like everybody else. I grew up in Detroit. I grew up watching big-time wrestling on CKLW out of Windsor, Canada, and Dick the Bruiser, and Crusher, and Sheik, and Bobo Brazil. These were all people that, I grew up watching, and some of those names, to be a part of the WWE Hall of Fame, and now here I am. Vern Gagne was the guy that gave me my start.
Yeah, you started with him.
Yeah, in Minneapolis. And to be even in the same neighborhood as some of those names, just it was emotionally a little overwhelming for me, to be honest.
And speaking of the Hall of Fame and getting inducted, and now you're coming to St. Louis, and you're going to be in front of people, and the Hall of Fame, you had people. I mean, there was a period of time there that obviously you have the podcast 83 Weeks, which is going great, and I love the podcast. I love listening to you guys talk wrestling. Not so much nowadays. I don't really watch. I haven't watched since you left, to be honest with you. But to be able to get back in front of people again like you are this weekend, I mean, it had to be stir-crazy for especially somebody like you who loves to go out and meet people and not be able to do that, and now we're back to doing that again.
Yeah, it's really special, and I think it's something that a lot of us, as performers took for granted because, from the beginning of my career, whether it be in the AWA where you're out in front of 1,000 or 1,200 people. And then, in WCW, when I first got there, the crowds were relatively small, but you still had live crowds. Nitro, of course, changed everything. And then I got an opportunity to be out in front of 10 or 15 or 20 or sometimes more thousand people. And then, I had a great run in WWE as an on-camera character. And same thing. And we all took it for granted. And then, obviously, COVID changed everything. And I spent a lot of time, not a lot, but I spent a fair amount of time, whether it was in AEW on television, but no real live crowd. WWE, same thing. When I got inducted to the Hall of Fame, we were in front of a virtual crowd. It's not the same, and you miss that energy, and that it's a weird connection that you get to the audience when you're in front of a live crowd. It's an exchange of emotional energy that you can't replace. It's very special. So I'm even more grateful for it now than perhaps I've ever been.
Yeah, we're talking to Eric Bischoff. He is going to be in town this weekend, this Saturday, with Jeff Jarrett. They're going to be at the South Broadway Athletic Club from 2 to 5, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, VIP. You can get stuff signed. You can meet Jeff and Eric and get pictures. And then from 3 to 5, it'll be the live show, which gives you plenty of time to get over to the Dome to see the Royal Rumble. And you can get tickets at ericandjefflive.com. Purchase your tickets and go out and meet those guys this Saturday. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of wrestling, because there's so much I want to talk to you about, and hopefully you got a little bit of time, what is going on with you and Tony Khan? I mean, I thought you guys got along when you worked together, but he seems to be taking it to another level.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I've been somewhat critical. I've reacted to some of the things that Tony has said publicly. There has been times when Tony has said things that I have found to be disrespectful of me or what I've achieved in my career, and I think more importantly, very disrespectful towards Ted Turner. And I reacted to that in an honest way, as I would react to him to his face. And I was reacting to something that he said, and I was questioned about his comments. I don't sugarcoat things. I never have. People that come to the show in St. Louis will find that out firsthand if they haven't met me in person previously. But I just reacted honestly. I wasn't taking shots necessarily. I was reacting. And I think Tony is a very sensitive individual, and I get that. He's passionate, and there's nothing wrong with being sensitive or passionate. But I've never been, aggressively critical or I've never taken shots at AEW. I have a lot of respect for Tony and a lot of respect for what he's trying to do with AEW. And some of the talent there are friends of mine. Some of the producers backstage are good friends of mine. So it's not a situation where I'm not supportive of AEW or Tony Khan in particular, but, I call out BS when I hear it. And, especially if it's directed in if it's headed in my direction. And some people can take that and some people overreact to it. And apparently Tony's the latter.
Did he ever call you back? I know you reached out to call him and he never called back.
No, he never did, and that's another, I think, indicator of someone who may be a little more sensitive than necessary. It wasn't my intention to disparage Tony in any way or take anything away from what he's achieved or attempting to achieve in the future. But he took it the wrong way, I guess, or took it personally, and I found out about it. And the person that told me said, "Hey, why don't you just give Tony a call and hash it out over the phone?" And I did, because I have no problem doing that. But left a message for Tony and never heard back. So I think that says more about Tony than it does about anything that I happen to say, to be honest.
I got to tell you, Eric, there's two people that turned me on to wrestling. One was you, and one was Bill Goldberg. And because back in the day, WCW would send people in advance to certain radio stations when they were going to that town, and they asked me, who I was producing the morning show at the time, if we'd be interested in Bill Goldberg. And I had to ask around the station. I said, "Who is Bill Goldberg? I don't watch wrestling. Is he somebody we want to talk to?" And "Oh yeah, you got to get Goldberg in." So we brought him in, and he was a fascinating guy. He was fun to talk to. And then I started watching wrestling, and then I just got turned on because I go back, and I'm sure a lot of people do. I go back to the WCW days, and it was, even though we knew it wasn't real, it just seems so real. When you go back to NWO attacking, WCW wrestlers, and it's in Orlando, and when you have people calling 911 Orlando saying, "Hey, you got to get over there. There's a riot going on over there," and you see the wrestlers who broke character and just started reacting, and it seems so real. And you don't see that nowadays. I mean, I stopped watching because it's the same shit week after week. It's the same storylines, and it just doesn't get me involved like you guys did.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do, well, first of all, thank you for saying that, because the magic in professional wrestling has always been, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but the magic has always been, being able to find that sweet spot, the gray area, when you can entertain people to the point where they're not really sure if wrestler A really doesn't like wrestler B. I remember when I was a kid, and I was like, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, I'm watching professional wrestling. And even at 10 or 12, 13 years old, there was just so much of what I saw that I knew. I wasn't, as they say in the, dirt sheet community, smartened up, but it was pretty obvious that some of the stuff was just choreographed, right? But there was always two or three, matches or two or three guys where you go, yeah, I know the rest of that stuff may be a little staged, but these two guys really don't like each other. And I tried to take that and apply it to what we were doing in WCW, especially with Nitro and particularly with the NWO. And it worked. And that's the magic. It's what makes wrestling really work, is creating storylines and issues between the people that are performing that feel so believable and real that the audience forgets that they're watching professional wrestling. It's no different than going to a movie.
I agree.
And you go to that movie, that what you're seeing was a performance, created by writers and directors and actors and actresses. But if it's a really good movie, it affects you emotionally. If it's a sad movie, I still cry at Disney movies. I mean, you give me a Disney dog movie or an underdog sports movie, I get emotional over it because you forget. The performances allow you to forget and allow your emotions to kind of rise to the surface, and that's the enjoyment. And I think your point is correct. In today's environment, they're not allowed to do that as much anymore. Wrestling is, because it's gotten so sophisticated as a business, it's so driven by advertisers and advertising and television, they go hand in hand, that you have to walk a very narrow path in terms of what you're able to do on screen and in the ring. And the result of that is a much more sanitized product.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
not
have to
as
make
edgy.
a choice. You have to make a choice as a producer. Are you producing a commercial product that's viable for the advertising and television community, or are you producing something that's viable for, a hardcore kind of dirt sheet wrestling community kind of an audience? It's one or the other. Independent wrestling has, the luxury, I guess, because they're not driven by advertisers, to do a lot of the crazier, edgier, over-the-top stuff. Where WWE, who's serving the broader masters of television and advertising, they have to be much more careful. But the result is a more sterile, sanitized product.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure it makes you feel good, but are you surprised that 20-plus years later, people are still talking about WCW, NWO, and Nitro?
Yes, I'd be less than honest if I said no. I am, and I don't know. Surprised is the right word. I think grateful is a better word, because while it was happening, of course, it was like, oh my gosh, this is great. We turned WCW around, turned it into a profit center for the first time in its history at Turner Broadcasting. Outperformed the WWE in head-to-head competition. All those things that certainly we recognized and appreciated in the moment, but in the moment had no idea of the profound impact it would have on people 20 and 25 years later. It's pretty amazing.
Now you beat, and that's the name of your podcast, 83 Weeks, 83 straight weeks of beating WWE. I don't even know if you can answer this question, but were you close to putting them out of business at any point?
I don't know for certain. I only know what I was told by people that were there at the time. Some of them have become pretty close friends of mine at this point. And according to them, yes, it was very touch and go for WWE for a period of time. And I think it was probably one of the reasons that you saw WWE, in 95, they didn't pay much attention to us. 96, they didn't really pay much attention to us. By the end of 96 and going into 97, they completely abandoned their previous formulas and formats and adapted to the more reality-based, edgier, aggressive storylines that we were using in Nitro that resulted in us, overtaking them in terms of ratings and performance.
Did you see the writing on the wall with the Time Warner merger, or were you kind of surprised by what they started doing?
I didn't. I was naive. We were on such a great roll, and I had a pretty good relationship with Ted Turner because of what I achieved, not on a personal level. Ted and I didn't go out to dinner or anything like that, but WCW was Ted Turner's baby. The majority of the executives in Turner Broadcasting wanted nothing more than to pull the plug on WCW 2 months after it was created back in 1989. And WCW performed so abysmally from the very beginning that there was always, I can't say there was pressure on Ted, but there was a lot of suggestions to Ted that let's just get rid of this WCW thing. It doesn't really fit our programming profile. It's not really what we want. It's not producing any revenue. It's losing money. There are a million reasons, and some of them very valid. But when we finally turned it around, my relationship with Ted professionally was such that I knew that regardless, or I believed, I should say, that regardless of whatever influences AOL or Time Warner may try to, pressure on WCW, I had Ted Turner in my corner. Well, what I didn't know, and this is where the naive part came, what I didn't know, and what Ted Turner didn't know, actually, if you read any of the autobiographies, things that have been written about Ted, is that during that AOL Time Warner process, Ted Turner was losing power. And he didn't realize it until it was too late. And they basically gave him a corner office with no vote. And I didn't realize that was happening. And once I realized it had happened, it was too late.
Yeah.
Because I was betting on that guy that I could always count on to have my back, and that guy couldn't even, protect his own interests at that point.
A couple minutes left with Eric Bischoff. Again, you can see him and Jeff Jarrett this Saturday from 2 to 5 out at the South Broadway Athletic Club, 2 to 3 VIP with Eric and Jeff. Get your pictures taken, sign autographs, all that good stuff. And then 3 to 5, the live show. You can go to ericandjefflive.com and order your tickets, and you'll have plenty of time to get over to the Royal Rumble Saturday night as well. I was talking about Goldberg earlier, and he became my favorite wrestler. And I was still pissed off when his losing streak came to an end when he got tasered by Nash and Hall. But I have to ask, at what point, when you brought him into WCW, did you decide that we were going to give him this long streak of wins? And was it a week-to-week thing? Say, I think it'll be good if he loses this week to this guy? Or how did that whole streak come about? And were you shocked that it became as big as it did?
It was a function of necessity, really, because, Bill came in, out of the NFL. I mean, Bill's obviously a phenomenal athlete, had been all of his life, nothing new. But, learning how to be a professional wrestler takes a lot of time in order to kind of develop the skill sets and the move sets and the ability to have various types of matches with various types of wrestlers. It's not something you can learn in 2 or 3 or 4 months. If in reality, if you take Bill Goldberg and The Rock out of the equation and you look at everybody else that's been in the industry at the very top, all of them had been in the industry for 10, 12 years before they really made a name for themselves.
Yeah.
It takes that long to not only develop a feel and the skill set and the talent and the charisma necessary to be at the very top, but the wrestling audience is a very, people don't give wrestling audiences enough credit. They're extremely loyal, but they're not going to accept you as a bona fide star until you've paid your dues. So we get this guy named Bill Goldberg who comes in, phenomenal look, great athlete, and incredible charisma, intensity. He has everything that he needs to be a star except for the experience. So we brought Bill out, in his first couple of matches were what we call dark matches. He'd come out in front, we'd have a television set up or ready to go with a live show, but prior to the live show, as the audience is coming in, we would do dark matches that were designed to give young talent the experience they needed to wrestle in front of a crowd, because that's different than training in a training facility, much, much different. And the first couple of times Bill came out during these dark matches, we're sitting backstage, and the crowd just really reacted to him. And typically that didn't happen in dark matches. You had to beg for a reaction during a dark match from a live crowd. Bill walked out, the crowd would erupt. And we all kind of looked at each other and went, oh, maybe there's something here. But we were so limited in terms of what we could do. You're not going to put him in a 20-minute match with Ric Flair.
Yeah.
You can't do that, right? You certainly can't have him beat Ric Flair, at that stage of his career. The audience would have revolted on him. So that's where the idea was, look, let's just let him come out and squash people. Let's just feed him people each and every week and build on that momentum. And every time we did it, momentum became more and more palpable. The crowd reaction became more and more intense. And it was probably a month or 2 or 3 after we first, put Bill on television instead of dark matches, that we all looked around at each other and went, wait, there's a lot of things we can't do with this guy because he doesn't have the skill sets yet or the experience. But here's one thing we can do. We can just have him go out and eat people and build up this, incredible win streak until it's appropriate to put an end to it. And there you go. It was, out of necessity and opportunity, really.
And it got to the point, too, I was just like that. I said, hell with the hammerlock. Spear him, damn it.
Yeah, nobody wants to see Bill Goldberg go out there and do a Hurricane Rana or a standing switch. They want to see him. They want to see him cut somebody in half in the middle of the ring with a spear.
Oh, a couple storyline things I want to ask you. Storyline you wish you could take back that didn't quite work out.
Oh my gosh, there's too many. Look, I think about this when people bring it up like this, but the Sting Hogan storyline was such a, to this day, one of the best storylines I think ever constructed, without question. I don't think there's another storyline that anybody can point to that was so effective for such a long time. That storyline built for over a year.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's like going to a great movie with a horrible ending. The only thing you remember is the ending. You forget the rest of the movie. And that's what the Hogan Sting storyline was. And there were reasons for that. It wasn't just, a whim or politics, as people who weren't there presume. There was a reason for it. And I'm not going to go into those reasons because it had to do with Sting and what it was he was going through in his life at that time. But, I wish things would have been different, because that storyline would probably be one today that people would be talking about for the next 25 years.
Oh, compared to Game of Thrones, it was great up until the last part.
Yeah, or Dexter, like, oh my God, Dexter. People were pissed off about Dexter, and a lot of people felt the same way about the Hogan Sting storyline.
A storyline you wish you would have done that didn't come to fruition, like one you had that, God, this would have worked if we'd have just done it.
I think, and this falls in a way into the same type of category as Sting, Hogan, but certainly Bret Hart. We didn't do Bret any favors, but Bret didn't do himself any favors either. I think the timing, and it didn't. It's not because Bret wasn't a professional, and it wasn't because he wasn't a great performer. It wasn't any of that. There were circumstances that existed that I think prevented or inhibited Bret from really being where Bret needed to be to achieve what Bret wanted to achieve. Certainly a Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan story could have been amazing, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would like to see that. Including
Bret,
yeah.
including me. But here's the tough part of being in the position I was in, or Vince McMahon is in, or at some point even Tony Khan's going to be in, is you're dealing as a producer, a promoter, whatever you want to call it. You're dealing with real people with real lives in real situations that you know about, that you have to manage, that the general audience isn't aware of. And sometimes there's issues. Sometimes there's challenges that are not obvious to the audience, but are obvious to the people that are involved in producing these matches or these television shows, whatever they may be. And it's unfortunate, but that was the situation with Bret, at least in my opinion. Bret has his own opinion about it, and whatever, his opinion is his opinion, and perspective is his perspective. But I know what I had to deal with, and it is indeed unfortunate. I wish we could have done better for Bret. I wish I could have done better for Bret. I wish the situation would have been different, but it wasn't. There's nothing we can do about it.
And I've always wanted to ask you, I'll end with this because it's something I've wanted to ask you about, and I've never seen you talk about it, and I don't know why, but you went to North Korea. You spent some time in North Korea, and I'd like to know what that experience was like.
It was the most amazing experience of my professional career, and maybe one of the most, outside of having children, which is life-changing, probably one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. I grew up in Detroit, as I said. I'm a product of the 60s, right? I was born in 1955, so throughout grade school and early junior high, in history and social studies, we learned a lot about the Soviet Union and communism, and your you're taught and exposed to how radically different it is to the life we experience here in the United States, or at least used to experience here in the United States. And I was always fascinated. I always wanted to go to the Soviet Union before it collapsed, because I wanted to experience what life was like in a communist country. I wanted to experience what life was like in an environment where the government has so much control over everything you read, everything you believe, everything you're allowed to do. I wanted to see what that felt like. And going to North Korea for me was that experience, that opportunity that I always wished I would have been able to experience when I was younger, just to see for myself, what could that possibly be like? And it was more profound than I would have imagined, even as a 12-year-old, learning about communism and how, you go to a store to buy bread and there's no stores on the shelf and you have to wait in line, and how there is no real news or real information, or, entertainment is controlled by the government, and, all of that. It was more profound than I would have imagined. And I think the most significant moment that occurred to me where I really saw it and felt it, not saw it, when I really felt it, because I got up I used to run a lot back then in the mid-'90s. I'd run about 6 or 8 miles every morning. And I got up one morning really, really early. It was still dark. I was in downtown Pyongyang. And when we got to Korea, back up just a moment, when we got to Korea, we were each assigned a attaché, which was a government representative to watch every move we made, right? And they usually showed up at our hotel around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning when it was time for us to get on a bus and go tour or do whatever we were going to do in North Korea that day. Well, I got up really early in the morning. I don't think anybody expected that. And my attaché wasn't there. So I just got up and put on my sweat stuff and threw on my shoes and decided to go out for a 5-mile run. And I started out in the dark, running through downtown Pyongyang, and as the sun was coming up, the streets began to fill up with people walking to work because nobody had cars there. Everybody either walked to work, a few people had bicycles. And I'm wearing, bright red sweatpants and a bright colored shirt, whatever. And here I am, 5'11", 175, 180 pounds, jogging down the street, American, jogging down the streets of downtown Pyongyang, North Korea by myself. And the look of terror that was in the eyes of the North Koreans that I met on the street, it really hit me. Because these people, these citizens of North Korea from, the mid-'50s grew up indoctrinated. They were taught that Americans were evil, that we would rape their women and eat their babies, and we were monsters, and they were terrified of us. They were taught from the time that they could walk that Westerners, but Americans in particular, were the most evil people on earth. And they thought we would eat their children if we had the chance. I was told that by a North Korean that I got a little bit close to when I was there. And I saw it in their eyes. There's a difference between fear and terror. I've seen fear throughout my life, but I had never seen terror. That was terror. And to think that they would literally part, it was a crowded street, right? It's like 7 o'clock in the morning, and people would see me coming and they would just split, and create a wide swath of the street because they didn't know what to do. They would put their backs up against a wall. It was freaky. That's all I can say. It was just, I couldn't wait to get back to my hotel.
Yeah, I can imagine. Especially thinking, what did I do?
Well, I kind of sensed it. I didn't, because when we were touring, they took us all throughout North Korea, and of course we were there for propaganda purposes. The North Korean government wanted us there to show the world that they were, a more open society than they really are, and they used us as a pawn to kind of promote that. And we knew that going in. I certainly knew that going in. But because I was by myself and I wasn't part of the North Korean political group that was taking us on tour, that was really scary for them. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy's running around looking for babies to eat.
God. Scary, man. Well, I'm glad
it was interesting.
It
was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to experience that. I would like a lot of people. I mean, I went to Cuba a few times. It was a little different because they knew you weren't supposed to be there. You know, they knew that Americans weren't supposed to be there, so they kind of liked you coming over and spending your money over there and kind of defying your government. So it was a little bit different, but God, I don't know if I could handle it if I was over there and I saw that.
Well, it's a lot different for Cubans because, you know, Canadians often travel to Cuba. You know, Westerners, you know, Europeans, you know, go to Cuba. A lot of people, even though Americans aren't allowed to go there, you know, Westerners are. Canadians do. But in fact, I was told, you know, once I got off the plane and into my car, my attaché that was with me, and she spoke pretty good English, told me that I was only the 7th American that stepped foot into North Korea that hadn't been shot down or captured since the end of the Korean conflict.
Wow.
So, yeah, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, big deal.
and again, even Europeans, you know, Europeans don't go to North Korea. Very few Westerners are allowed into the country or go into that country. So it was a fascinating experience. It's, you know, it's changed a little bit. Dennis Rodman went over there. A few other people went over there after I did, but it was fascinating, no doubt about it.
This is the kind of stuff you can expect Saturday night, I'm guessing.
Oh, that and more. You know, you listen to the podcast, and we're pretty open on the podcast. You know, we don't have too much of a filter, but we still do. It's still a commercial enterprise, so we're a little bit careful about where we go and what we say. But that's a great thing about these live shows is there's no tape, you know, there's no evidence. we're not going to upset any advertisers. We can go out there and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, no matter how over the top it may sound. But that's the fun of doing these shows. And the other thing is, you know, the live crowd. You know, they've got some great questions. They've got great insight. They challenge us. It's a combination of interrogation and stand-up comedy. You know, and storytelling. So it's a lot of fun, and we have a blast.
And please don't ask Jeff to bash you over the head with a guitar. I'm guessing he won't do that.
Man, I've taken that guitar shot, and I'm still here to talk about it. Jeff and his guitar don't scare me none.
Hey, do me a favor, too. At some point, you've got to write another book. I got to tell you, when I picked up Controversy Creates Cash, I know it's 400-something pages long. I finished it in a day and a half. I couldn't put it down. Write another book, will you?
I'm actually in the process.
Oh, great!
You heard it here first.
Heard it here
now,
first.
I'm not 100% sure. You know, we're going to publish it. I kind of think we are, and we're working on it as we speak. But there's a very good possibility you'll see a book come out in 2022.
Well, if you don't publish it, at least send it to me so I can read it.
There you go. You got a deal.
Once again, you can see Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett this Saturday night, 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock at the South Broadway Athletic Club. VIP tickets and your tickets for the 3 to 5 live show you can get at ericandjefflive.com. I look forward to being out there and finally get to meet you. We've talked a few times, but I'm looking forward to meet you guys, and I hope everybody gets out there because it's really going to be a fun 3 hours.
I promise everybody listening, if you come, you will have a great time, and you'll be looking forward to the next one.
Everybody listen to 83 Weeks on your podcast. It's a great listen.
Wherever you get your favorite podcast, drops every Monday morning. We do our best to enlighten and to entertain.
Eric, thanks, buddy. I look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Thank you, pal. Look forward to it.
All right.